and welcome to another video. Today I would like to talk about my autumn knitting plans. I realized on the 1st of October that it was actually autumn. I am more so someone who works in quarters of years rather than seasons, and that's why this video is coming a bit late. But I just want to get right into it. Some space for the patterns, and let's start. The first pattern I would like to talk about is from a Japanese pattern book. It's called makimono, which translates to scarves, and these are designs all by Yoko Hata, also known as Kaze Kobo. And this book, I would highly recommend checking this out. It's all in diagrams anyways, so it's probably not going to be too hard for anyone to figure this out. Also, maybe with some Google Translate, you can get some of the finer details in here, but this book is excellent. Excellent scarves. The pattern that I'm currently working on from this book is called Swan, and it's just this beautiful circular shawl with a 3-stitch garter border, and it's for the most part just stockinette, and the stockinette sections are separated by a couple of rows of garter stitches, which includes some lace, which is pretty basic lace, just one yarn over, and that's about it. And that's basically also the way the scarf increases. So on every other row you have 2 yarn overs on the sides, and then after a couple of rows of stockinette stitch you'll have a number of eyelets, and those serve as the increases of the scarf. Beautifully made. You start off with a small strip of garter stitch, and then you knit the front, then you knit the side of the strip, and then the bottom, and that's how you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Yeah, so the yarn that is used for this pattern is from Hamanaka. It's called Sonomono Royal Alpaca, and it's 100% alpaca, and it's not lace weight, it's fingering weight yarn actually. It's 105 meters per 25 grams, and they used the color off-white. Now obviously, not obviously, but I'm in the Netherlands, and so I don't really have a lot of access to Japanese yarns, especially Hamanaka. It's not widely available, at least here in the Netherlands, and so I had to think of a substitute, and so I'm using this right here, Soft Lama Fine, and it's 100% baby llama, and it's a sport weight yarn, 166 meters per 50 grams. I had initially planned to use this for a sweater or a pullover, and that's when I realized that llama yarn doesn't have a lot of memory, and so it would stretch out, and I didn't want to deal with taking into account the stretch over time, and it would just be a complete hassle. And so I looked up patterns that you could use for llama or alpaca, and scarves came up. And then I realized that I had this book from which I hadn't worked any patterns off, and so I thought this would be the perfect combo. So yeah, what else do I have to say about this? I forgot the color. The color number is 928, and the name is Zwarte Bonen. It's black beans in English, but I don't know if the English name is the same as the Dutch one. So there's that. I am super excited to finish off this one this week, and after that I am jumping, or I hope to jump straight into another scarf project from this book again. The next one that I would like to knit is called Grid, and this one is really cool in my opinion, just because of the colors. You have lots of bold and loud colors, and still it doesn't look very, how would I say this? It doesn't look too intense. I should say. I really, really love this design. So it's just a plain stockinette stitch scarf with intarsia and a garter stitch border. So you start off with one color of, I think it's brown. So you start off with the brown color, and then you switch to two colors that you knit intarsia with the garter border on the side, and then you switch colors. You do, I believe, another garter stitch or garter row, 4 rows I believe, and then you continue. And what I think is also very cool, and something that you probably can't see from the picture, is the fact that the intarsia line shifts every grid, if that makes any sense. So for one color block section, you have the intarsia line here, then the next one is there, then the next one is here. And I think that also makes for a very interesting effect. Unfortunately, there's no flat layout picture of the scarf, so you have to kind of visualize it with the colors yourself. The book does have the, how would I say it, has a drawing of it here, but you know, that doesn't have the magic of the colors. And again, this yarn is, well, the yarn that is used for the sample is not very available here in the Netherlands. I believe it's called, what's the name? The original name is Richimoa Excellento Mohair. So Richmore Excellent Mohair, and it is 76% Super Kid Mohair and 24% nylon. And it has a yardage of 200 meters per 20 grams or 500 meters per 50 grams. So what does that mean? It's a lace weight, a very, very fine lace weight, I believe. Yes. It still looks very fluffy in the sample. So I had some struggles trying to find a yarn that I could substitute it with, and the thing is that I have to find something that's fluffy and thin because the scarf is quite big. I don't want it to be too heavy, of course. And then I also needed to find a yarn that carried all these shades, and that was quite tricky. I have, I think, been looking for this for maybe 3 or 4 months, something like that. And I first found Mayflower Kid Silk, or mohair, silk mohair, Mayflower silk mohair. But eventually I settled on a yarn from Holst Garn. It's called Ttiticaca alpaca, and I looked up what that meant. Apparently it is a lake in South America, but in terms of fiber content, it is 100% alpaca, lace weight 400 meters per 50 grams, so not as fine as the Richmore, but I think this will work. They had an excellent range of colors. I think the only color that I had difficulties looking for was the very dark, intense blue, and I ended up picking the color Midnight, but the yarn hasn't arrived yet, so I can't really show you how it looks, but I do think that I have found one of the best options, so I'm very excited to start working on it. Now, those are all of the modern patterns that I was planning to work on. I obviously still have the Isaya Archives collection that I'm working my way through, but I don't really want to talk about those in this video because I've just been talking about the collection ever since it came out, and I don't want to start thinking about it now because Also, this project has been, I wouldn't say necessarily a nightmare, but it has been really hard in terms of trying to find substitutes when it comes to the Isaya yarn. The thing is that I think Isaya yarn is really nice. It's great quality. The thing is, it's quite unaffordable if I'm going to make 14 pieces. And a lot of these patterns have your classic two strands held together, and that makes it even more expensive. So I've had lots of trials and tribulations trying to figure out how to knit up all of these, but you'll hear more about that in my podcast episodes. So there's that. Now let's move on to the vintage patterns. Now, in one of my recent podcast episodes, I spoke about wanting to work with finer yarns, working with less yarn but more yardage. I'm basically saying I want to work with fingering weight and sport weight yarn more and create more pieces with that type of yarn. And I found that I didn't really have all that much in my stash, and so I was trying to find an affordable way to get my hands on some of it. And I found one website called Woolunatics. They are a Dutch company, and they have very thin yarns for very, very affordable prices. Even yarns with a yardage of 1500 meters per 100 grams. So you'll have to double those or even triple those up. In any case, very affordable yarn, and I bought a few cones, so I was looking at vintage patterns that I could use for that. I also bought 3 packs of Holst Garn Coast with their scrap yarns. Basically, on their website they have this thing where they have leftovers of their yarns, and so they sell them for really cheap. It's about 200 grams for 10 euros, so 500 euros for 100 grams, which is a great price in my opinion for high quality yarn. And I got 3 of them. I didn't really have a lot of choice in terms of color selection because, well, right after I bought them, they replenished their stock, so that was a bit of a shame. But yeah, I can show you what I have. So the colors that I managed to get were moorland, clove, and saffron. So these packages are perfect because when it comes to fingering weight and sport weight yarn, I can knit up a short sleeve blouse with about 200 grams. So I'm very excited about that. I got a hold of a number of vintage patterns that I was really interested in. They're all from Jack Frost. This was an American yarn company from, I believe, 1928 up until the late 80s, early 90s. So they've now gone defunct, but in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they had excellent sweater and blouse patterns, and so some of these are online available. So that's the situation I'm in right now. I have quite a lot of fingering weight yarn and a small amount of sport weight yarn and a bunch of vintage patterns that I could use with this yarn. So for today I picked 2 patterns that I am very excited for. So these are most likely the ones that I'll be knitting this autumn. The first one is called Chartres, number 2712, and this is from Jack Frost volume 27, which came out back in 1938. And this is quite a simple fitted ribbed vest. I've knit, I think in total 3 vests to date, and all of them have been a bit baggy with at least about 10 centimeters of positive ease. And so I want something that's a bit more fitted and that's why I thought this would be perfect. So this is knit up as a vintage pattern, flat. You start with the back. I believe it's 2x2 rib you do for quite some time. After that, you switch to 1x1 rib, and then once you come to the armholes, you cast off a number of stitches. You work evenly for quite some time, and then you have a decrease row where you decrease a number of stitches evenly all across the back, and then you knit a section of garter, I believe an inch if I'm correct, roughly 2.5 centimeters, and then you start binding off stitches on each side to create some shoulder shaping. And then the interesting part is that the front is made in the same way, and this had me kind of confused because there is no neck shaping, there's no short rows, or how should I say this, extra length added in the back. So I'm kind of surprised that in the picture the model is not getting completely strangled. I think in this case I'm not just going to trust the process since it's quite a basic shape. I think I'm going to make some adjustments. Definitely I'm going to change the gauge. I believe this was knit with cashmere, and there's actually no, how would I say it? There's no gauge given in this pattern, and so I have to figure that out anyways. Might as well change up the gauge a bit, even though I don't know what the gauge is. In any case, I'm going to do that. And I was thinking about how to add more length at the back, and I just think I'm going to add a strip at the back. Maybe I have to think in terms of height, extra height. I think I might add 2 centimeters. I'm just going to consult some of my knitting books beforehand and choose an appropriate height to lift the back with. And also one thing that I actually always change when it comes to vintage patterns is the binding off section with the shoulder shaping. I generally just like to use Japanese short rows instead of binding off, because if you bind off you get this staircase effect, and with short rows, Japanese, German, wrap and turn, all of those, you get this smooth diagonal line, and you have live stitches which you can then bind off using a 3-needle bind off. So that's my favorite modification when it comes to shoulder shaping with vintage patterns. So that's the first vintage pattern. In terms of yarn, I might do some coast, but I can also just make a very quick knit with this yarn that I got recently because Novita was doing an autumn sale and they were selling these for €3.50 when generally these go for about €10. It's 100 grams of Novita's Wonder Wool from their natural collection. It's the color dark gray, I believe, and it has the code 44. It's DK weight 225 meters per 50 grams. So what's that? 112.5 meters per 50 grams. I think this actually would look very nice as a vest. So yeah, I have to think whether or not I want to do this with fingering weight yarn or DK weight yarn. It would be cozier with DK weight yarn. But as I said, I have lots and lots of vintage patterns that I would like to work on, so I'll see about that. In any case, the next one that I would like to knit is the Speed Knit Sleeveless Pullover number 5017, and this is from Jack Frost volume 50 Speed Knit Sweaters. So this is one of at least 2 volumes brought out by Jack Frost that focus on patterns that you can knit up faster than the ones with fingering weight yarn. So it's mostly just sport weight and a couple of worsted weight patterns, at least in this volume. So number 5017 is another vest, and this one is neat because it also uses some crochet. So you start off at the back, knitting flat, one by one rib, and then once you're done with that, you increase a number of stitches. Also, I forgot to mention which year this pattern is from. It doesn't say, but volume 49 came out in 1945 and volume 51 came out 6 years later. So it's anywhere between 45 and 51. So back to the pattern construction. Once you've done your ribbing, your increases, you start working the main body, and this is done in a particular motif. I don't know what the name is, but you start off with an uneven amount of stitches. I believe it's 4 plus 1. So you knit 1, purl 2, knit 2, and then once you're on the other side, you purl 1, knit 2, purl 2. So I'm not too sure what type of motif that is, but if I find it, I will put it somewhere here. So that's basically what you do. You knit up evenly all the way to the armholes, you bind off, you decrease a bit, and then you go all the way up. You do your typical binding off for the shaping, and that's that. So the front is essentially the same. The only issue or the only difference is that it's in 2 panels. So you knit this section separately and this section separately, and then you still do some neck shaping, which is just at some point casting off and then decreasing, whilst also doing the shoulder shaping. And then once that is done, actually, you start working on the finishing, and that's when you use crochet. So for the armholes, you crochet a whole round of single crochet. Then after that, you make this sort of shell crochet motif all around. And with the front, you do single crochet all the way around, and then you do 3 rows of single crochet here. So you end up at the neck again, you crochet back to the other side, and then you do this, I think, a number of single crochet rows, and then you add the shell motif again. I believe that's how it's done. As for yarn that I would like to use for this project, the pattern recommends sport weight yarn, and I happen to have this 300-gram cone of black wool. I believe it says 300 meters. Yes. Oh wait, no. Yes, no, yeah. 300 meters per 100 grams and 300 grams. So this should be more than enough for one vest. And I first wasn't too sure about this color because I don't think I've actually ever knit something that was completely black. So I don't know what to pair it with. Oh, I do think I have something to pair it with in my closet. So I have my clothes right in front of me, and I saw that there was something that would work with it. So that makes me a bit more confident about this color choice. On the other side, I am also just learning how to sew, and I finished sewing my first shirt last week, and for me it was a success. I got a sewing book that is filled with blouse patterns as well, and so I'm very excited to start working on that. So I think, yes, I'm very excited for this season. In any case, that's everything with regards to Jack Frost. There are loads of blouse patterns again that I have in my notion application. So hopefully I'll be able to knit through these 2 projects very quickly, and then I can go on to the other ones. But then again, I also have other projects, of course. I have 2 more. No, I don't have 2 more. I have 3 more vintage knits, and the first one is one that I've actually already tried out. It is Model 40 from Constanze Strickmoden, issue 4 from 1954. I actually managed to get my hands on the original magazine. So it's this one, and the pattern is one that I had already knit up in kind of my own way. It's called, I think it was called something like pullover with ribbed yoke, and it looked really pretty, very dainty to me, and I wanted to knit it up. And then once I got my hands on the pattern, I was surprised with the construction. So the original construction of this piece is you knit everything flat, of course, but you start at the bottom, you do some, I believe, 2x2 ribbing, you knit stockinette, and once you get to the armholes, you start shaping the arms with the piece. So the arms aren't knit separate, and so you have a garter stitch edge which kind of looks, in the picture, looks like 1x1 rib, but it's actually garter stitch. And at the same time as you're working the front, you're actually casting off stitches at the front, creating this yoke, this void yoke here, so that once you're done with the front, you pick up the stitches and then you knit the ribbed yoke, front yoke, and then the back is actually quite plain. There's nothing but stockinette stitch and then the garter stitch edge for the sleeves. And so I wanted to make it so that the ribbed yoke was all over. So I did some calculations, I changed the gauge, and then I started knitting from the top down to the bottom. It was just I changed it essentially into a circular yoke sweater pullover, and that was the first time that I did it, and it was a very helpful thing to do in terms of getting better with understanding constructions. I did make a couple of mistakes. I was struggling a lot with the sleeves. They were very short, but they were kind of wide, and they didn't really look flattering in my opinion, but I decided just to leave them, just I guess as kind of a reference for myself in the future, just to see how much better I've become at understanding construction. So this will be my second try, and this time again I would like to change the gauge. I think I knit this up with kind of sport weight yarn. I had very thin yarn and I held it triple, I believe. Yeah, and this time I want to try and use this yarn again because I have a lot of it, so I'll be able to make both a sweater and a vest out of it if I want to. In the original, because it was a circular yoke sweater, I needed some short rows in the back to raise it a bit, and I did so in the ribbed sections. So if you look at the back of that pullover, you'll see that the second and I think the first and the second section of ribbing are a bit longer at the back than at the front, and I was really happy with how it turned out because I don't think that you could really see where exactly the short rows were placed. I did use Japanese ones for them just because I love Japanese short rows. They're seamless, they're easy to do for me since I've worked so much with them, and chef's kiss. In any case, yeah, so I did that, and this time I would actually like to just add some length at the back and do that instead. I will still be going top down. And what else did I want to do? Yes, I wanted to add the collar because in my original one I didn't add the collar, and I was also thinking of adding, before I start with the collar, I'd add a welt. I think that would look really nice. And then I would make it full sleeves, a bit of puff I think, and then instead of 2x2 ribbing, I am planning on doing 1x1 twisted rib, just to cinch that up a bit more and give it a bit more of a feminine look. So that's my idea with that sweater, and I think that's everything for that one. Then I want to work on the cover model of Constanze Strickmoden Volume 2, Issue 2. This was so painstakingly hard to get a hold of. In any case, I have it now. Very, very happy with it. So I'll have the picture show up here on the side. So one of the reasons as to why I was really interested in this pullover, it doesn't really have a name. They call it Angora pullover because it's made with Angora. Really, really light. The whole pullover is about 200 grams, and it also has quite a fine gauge. I believe it's 32 stitches per 10 centimeters. So yeah, fingering weight actually. In any case, the construction for me was very interesting. I haven't completely deciphered the pattern. It's in German and my German isn't that strong, so it takes me some time to understand what's really being said. So I'm still working on translating everything, and even the pattern itself said that it was hard. A section of the pattern was quite hard, and so I was thinking, okay, if even this vintage pattern is saying it's quite hard, okay, it's gonna be quite a challenge, but I am up for this challenge. In any case, I am going to try my best to give you sort of a bird's view of this construction. So the front and the back are actually knit up in the same manner. I believe you start off with 2x2 rib. Yes, so you start off with 2x2 rib. It's very cinched in. I believe the model has the ribbing is supposed to be about 66 centimeters at the start, and then once you've finished the ribbing, you increase. Well, the entire pullover is ribbed, but when you kind of the border of the bottom, once you've done that, you increase by a third of the stitches, I believe, or a fourth of the stitches. Yes, because you only increase one of the pearls of the 2x2 ribbing, and so you again get kind of like this puffy increase at the bottom, and so the pattern goes from 2x2 rib to 2x3 with 2 knits and 3 pearls, and then you just knit up until the 8th round, and then you increase again a fourth of, not a fourth, but you increase again about the same amount of stitches as the previous time, and so now you knit 2x4 rib with 2 knits and 4 pearls, and that's what you do all the way up until the arms. You cast off a number of stitches and then you just knit up straight, and then you cast off straight. Then you move on to the arms. No idea what you do to the arms. You do some shaping at the bottom, no, at the top here, and I believe you also have the puffiness at the sleeve. So once you've done that, you have 4 pieces, 2 sleeves, the front and the back, and so it comes up, I believe, up until here. So you've done about a third of the yoke, I believe, something like that, and so 2/3 of the yoke is actually knit horizontally. or horizontal. Yeah, and so that is the section where they say, okay, this section is way harder than the other 4 parts that you knit previously, so you're gonna have to use this picture as a reference constantly so that you don't mess this up. And so essentially what you're doing is you're knitting the yoke, the top yoke, from one side to the neck, and at the same time you're also, I don't have a collar, but you're also working the collar, I believe. And so once you have all those pieces done, that's when you, I guess, you block everything and then you seam everything together. So very interesting construction in my opinion, going to take a lot of thinking work, but it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be really fun and really interesting. So that's everything in terms of German patterns, German vintage patterns. Then I am moving on. We're going back to Japanese patterns, but this time a Japanese vintage pattern. And if you've watched my podcast for quite some time, I have actually mentioned this piece previously, and I kind of left it on hold, and I want to actually finish this before the end of the year. It's from this booklet right here. It's Shujin Seikatsu, I think. Yeah, Shujin Seikatsu, so women's life. It was a women's magazine, post-war women's magazine. I don't know if they're still around. I'm not too sure, but they had special editions from time to time where they would show, or that, well, no, they had special editions where they had a supplement that would be this booklet right here, and it would just be filled with Japanese knitting patterns and also some Western ones as well, which is quite interesting. I didn't really know that the knitting ties between the West and Japan were already there. I know in Europe, especially now having experience with English, Dutch, and German vintage patterns, there was a lot of mingling here and there. So you'll see some of the vintage English girlies showing up in Dutch magazines as well, which is pretty cool. Or German ones in Dutch ones, or the other way around. But yeah, it didn't really, the idea didn't really settle with me up until today that this one also has some vintage Western patterns. In any case, the one that I wanted to knit, or am knitting at the moment, actually, I'm not that far, to be honest. I forgot the name, so I have to look it up. It's 15歳 shoujo ski setto, so 15-year-old girl knitting set. Is it? No, ski set. It's ski set. Yes, it's ski set. So this consists of an intarsia sweater, intarsia mittens, and then a hood. And these are all embellished with crocheted snowflakes that are then sewed on after the pieces have been knit. And I think I started this back maybe in May, something like that. And I do have to say, I was quite ambitious. I had knit at that point maybe 1 or 2 vintage knits, and I thought, maybe I think I can actually do this. And to be honest, I got through the back quite well, and also through, because first I have to translate it, then I have to modernize it, and then I can start knitting it. And before, at that time, I didn't really have a necessarily strong process of how I do things, and now I actually do kind of it. I've become, I would say I've refined my techniques more now when it comes to translating, modifying, modernizing vintage patterns. So first is just, I don't really know what the process is exactly, but I've become better at it, so to speak. So where I left off last time was that I finished the back. I did it. It was actually really interesting. So you start off with the contrast color. You do 2 by 2 ribbing, and then once you increase on the sides, and then once you've done that, you start doing intage flat, where you start in the middle, and every row you increase the main color by 2 stitches, so one on each side, and so you get this V all the way up, and then you knit for the armholes evenly up again, and then you bind off. And I did short rows. Did I do short rows? Maybe. I'll have to look. But I got to the back and then kind of just fell off on the project. And I think that's just because I don't know why it is. Maybe because it was overwhelming, or I think I don't know why. I think there were other things that were a bit more interesting at the time, but I do actually want to finish it this year. And I think it's going to look fabulous. So I'm knitting this with some drops Karisma. It's 100% wool. I believe it has a yardage of 100 meters, not grams, 100 meters per 50 grams. Yes, and I'm using the colors 76 dark purple. This is actually the main color, so for the body and everything, and then 47 lavender for the contrast color. So I can't really tell you much about, well, the mittens are just knit from bottom up, kind of regular construction. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at that yet. And then the top has some ribbing. It's a hood. Basically, it has some ribbing and a flap that I believe is knit separately. That's all I know or remember from all that. But yes, I am going to work on that very soon. Now, the final piece that I would like to talk about, I completely forgot. I have one more modern pattern, and this is actually not for me. This is for my boyfriend. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that my boyfriend he's tall, and so he has issues finding the right sized sweaters, one that will accommodate his torso. So I offered him to knit 3 sweaters, and that's what I'm doing. 2 down, 1 left to go. I have 3 months left. I think I'm going to knock this one out of the park. So this one is called Henry Nekuseta, and it's from the book Simperu Design no Men's Nitto. So Simple Men's Knit is the English title on the side. I don't know when this one came out. I think 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and it's from Vogue Japan. I think they've released maybe 4 or 5 books where they have simple basic sweaters for men, and the one of which I actually own a physical copy of is the most non-basic knitting pattern book ever. It's just all over cables, moss stitch here, reverse stockinette stitch, collar work. Nothing about that book screams basic, but luckily this one does. You have some just satin sleeves with stripes. You have some cabling, and you have some knits and pearls, but nothing that is, well, you have some statement pieces, but you also have a lot that are just very casual. And so I do have to say that this is my preferred men's knitting book, and the sizes are M, L, and XL, and these are Japanese sizes. My boyfriend has, I believe, a size M, European M, and I'm going to knit the XL for him with some modifications for the body and for the sleeves to make them fit him. So yeah, the Henry neck sweater is a Henry neck sweater, so buttons here, some ribbing here, and it's a raglan. It's knit bottom up flat, and it has a broken rib stitch all over. I think this is going to be a success because I don't think this has been in one of my podcasts yet, but the sweater that I finished recently for him was actually a top-down raglan, for which I used another Japanese book to kind of encourage me, I should say, to try it out. It's called Jibun Seta o Amu. I think I've written it down here. Oh yeah, Jibun Saizu no Seta o Amu. That's it. Excellent book on modifications and also basic sweater construction. So there's that. I figured out after these 2 times of knitting a sweater for him is that he's very sensitive to wool. Rustic wool is a no-go, and he runs quite warm, so very thick sweaters also not very suitable for him. And so that got me thinking, maybe it's because the first one I knit was very rustic Swedish yarn. The second sweater I knit was with Irish Aran tweed yarn from Donegal yarns, I believe. And for me that was quite soft, but still quite irritating to him. And so I was first thinking of using onion yarn because it's organic wool, 70%, and 30% nettle fiber. So it's plant-based, and it was quite soft actually. And in the end, we decided not to go for that yarn and instead go for something a bit more affordable. We went for Holst Garn Coast, and we got 2 500-gram cones, which made it way cheaper. I think it was about 66 euros for a kilogram. And it's 55% merino lamb's wool and then 45% cotton. This yarn actually. But then in a different color. I think the color was Wisteria. It's a light purplish color, but it hasn't come in yet. But yeah, it has a yardage of 350 meters per 50 grams. Did I say that already? In any case, I was thinking of holding a double because on the website of Holst Garn, it says that you can do that and get a DK weight yarn. So about 21 stitches per some rows. And the pattern itself uses Aran weight yarn, I believe, and has a gauge of about 18 stitches. So that won't really be too hard for me to go from 18 to 21, especially since it's all knit flat. So I think this is going to work out quite well. I have his measurements down now, so I'm not too worried about knitting something flat and then seeing whether or not it will fit him once it's done. So yes, those are all of the patterns I hope to work on in the coming couple of months. Of course, I also have other projects that I'm working on, which you'll see in my podcast. I'm very, very excited for the end of the year. It's going to be really, really busy, but I think it's going to be loads and loads of fun. In any case, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon in another video. Bye-bye!